Hello, everybody. And yes, Dr. Dwight A. Moody here with my weekly commentary on life, politics, and Jesus. Thank you for today. I hope you've got a cup of tea or coffee like I do in a comfortable place. I want to speak today about diversity. The White House has made diversity an un-American, un-democratic virtue. But here in the Meeting House, we celebrate diversity and also equity and inclusion. This is Black History Month, as you know, and three things are on my mind today. Last week, I gave tribute to three of my friends who are leaders, not just in their Black communities, but also in the American communities where they live in Pittsburgh, Atlanta, and New York. Maybe you missed all that. You can go back and watch it last week and catch up. But this week, I want to pay tribute to Jesse Jackson. He died this week, as you all know. I draw attention to his life and death first because he is from Greenville, South Carolina, right here where I live. We lowered flags and we are planning a memorial event for him. I think the details are to be announced today. I hope to attend. Second, I focus on him because I met him once on his birthday, October the 8th, 2016. I was serving as the interim president of the Baptist Seminary in Kentucky, which had offices in both Lexington and Louisville. In that capacity, I went to Louisville to attend an event at the St. Stephen's Baptist Church in Louisville, Kentucky, whose pastor I admire very much, Dr. Kevin Cosby. In those days, the church and the nearby school, Simmons College of Kentucky, they sponsored rallies and speakers, and this was one of those days. I went in. I'm not sure I told anybody I was going. I found a seat near the back, but Dr. Cosby came to get me and ushered me to the front row and set me down right between Jesse Jackson on my right and the Kentucky Secretary of State on my left, Allison Lundgren. We found out later that it was Jesse Jackson's 75th birthday. He was not the featured speaker, but he got up and spoke a few words. He wasn't feeling very well, but he was still charismatic and charming and very winsome, and I was honored to meet him. Third, I want to say with a lot of people that Jesse Jackson has been the most consequential Black leader in America between Martin Luther King and Barack Obama. Yes, I know there were some others like Muhammad Ali from Louisville. But Jesse Jackson, as someone else pointed out, was with Dr. King in Memphis when Dr. King was shot there on the balcony at the Lorraine Hotel in 1968. I have visited that site. But he was also with Barack Obama in South Chicago when Obama was elected president in 2008. So Jackson was the link holding hands with each of these transformational leaders in American history. During that time, he ran for president, as you know, twice. I listened to some of his speeches. He was a very gifted speaker. He left behind an organization called the Rainbow Coalition, as many of you know. He was famous for his appeal to keep hope alive. And when he spoke, especially to young people and children, he was famous for reminding them that they are somebody. You are somebody, he would say. And you know, he became famous when he read that book, Green Eggs and Ham. He's read it a lot over the years. If I have time at the end of the show, I'm going to play a video that displays some of his rhetorical ability and also gives him an opportunity to remind us all to keep hope alive. We need that today. Rest in peace, Jesse Jackson. You made a difference. You done good. We as a nation are better because you were here, because you took a stand, because you said what needed to be said. May your life inspire other people, including me. Second, during this Black History Month, I report that I read a book this week. One of you, I think listening today, heard a man speak, bought his book, asked him to sign it to me, which he did, and she sent it to me to read and review, which I did. Here is the book. I have my copy of it. It's called Our Trespasses. I take on, of course, that phrase from the Lord's Prayer, subtitle White Churches and the Taking of American Neighborhoods. I read it straight through over the course of maybe a day and a half. It is wonderfully structured and written. Greg Jarrell is the author of the book. I do not know him. I think he says in the book that he grew up at First Baptist Church, Charlotte, North Carolina. He tells the story of that church. Their 2 votes. They had outgrown their facilities in downtown Charlotte, and a committee brought a recommendation to leave the urban center of Charlotte and move to the south suburbs where all the rich white people were moving. But in a very dramatic day in, I think, 1963, the congregation, with over 1,000 people casting ballots, standing ballots, by a vote of 2-1, decided not to take that recommendation and move away from the center of the city. And then a short time later, they decided to move a short distance away in the downtown area. At the time, and this was the 1960s, Charlotte and many other cities were enamored with urban renewal. It was a national effort to abolish what they called blighted sections of the city and create a mixture of public space and private space, parks and government buildings. And that's what happened in Charlotte. And when some of this once dilapidated, blighted area, black area, was put up for sale by the government, First Baptist Church bought a big chunk of it, paid far more than what the government paid the original black owners. They built a big new modern church complex. I read the book. I was fascinated by it. I go to Charlotte frequently. My grandson Sam lives there. I have a number of good friends who live in Charlotte. I wrote a review of this. You can read that on my website at themeetinghouse.net. The specific address is themeetinghouse.net/trespasses. I'm going to send it out in my newsletter this week, and I hope many of you, if not all of you, are subscribed, and you can subscribe at themeetinghouse.net. Finally, I want to announce for the first time on this show that the famed choral group, the American Spiritual Ensemble, is coming to the Carolinas. Their tour is March 15 to 21. It includes Charlotte and Davidson, which is just outside of Charlotte, up in North Carolina, Birmingham, Alabama, and then right here in Greenville, South Carolina, on, I think, Saturday night, March the 21st. I'm going to have more to say about this. This ensemble, the American Spiritual Ensemble, was founded and directed by a dear friend of mine, Dr. Everett McCormick. He is the director of the opera program at the University of Kentucky. And I know some of you are surprised that I even know anybody who sings opera. Yes, it's surprising, but life has many twists and turns. I hope to dedicate an entire broadcast here in the Meeting House to the American Spiritual Ensemble. I will have more to say about all of that in the weeks ahead. Now let's turn from life to politics, and just this short word about the week. The Supreme Court, God bless them, finally stepped up and said no to the president. Long overdue. They've said yes, 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 way too many times. I hope it's not too late. But many people think this decision was a turning point, that maybe the court has gotten tired of the president bending the law, stretching the truth, and ignoring the Constitution. I want to say this. This is the deepest conviction I have about the whole Trump era. The greatness of the United States will be demonstrated as never before by our ability to survive the Donald, to keep our democracy intact, and to embrace the worldwide diversity that is one of the beautiful things about being an American. So I want to say with Jesse Jackson, keep hope alive. You, me, all of us. Let's not despair. Let's protest. Let's march and strike and vote and pray and sing for joy. I'm with the American Spiritual Ensemble, and that music is one mighty way we can nurture our hopeful spirits and spread hope. It is contagious, you know. I'll have more to say about all of that in the weeks ahead. Now let's turn to Jesus and our red letter lesson. I've been reading and talking about Jesus in the Gospel of John. I've said this, that the Gospel of John looks different, feels different, reads different than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But in reading through John's Gospel, I've identified 4 practices of Jesus. These are things that John emphasizes. And I emphasize them on this show and today, and I offer them to you as a way to cope with life and death, with failure and success, with doubt and faith, with courage and with fear. We all need help. These are the 4 things that Jesus did repeatedly, as presented in the Gospel of John. 1, attending religious festivals. Festivals remind us of how people celebrate the presence and power of God in both their personal life and in public life. And that's always important. We Christians have festivals that do the same. Number 2, Jesus spent a lot of time eating with friends and foes, saints, sinners, and seekers. Now, in this way, John is very similar to the other 3 Gospels. There is nothing that Jesus did consistently and reported more regularly by the Gospel writers than just eating with people. How we can be blessed and how we can be a blessing through the simple act of table fellowship, maybe in our home, maybe outside, maybe in a public space. Number 3, conversing with people about spiritual things. It reminds us of how often people need to talk with us, with you, with me, about things that matter, such as purpose in life and how to live a meaningful life and how to influence others, and how all of us need to move toward fulfillment and faith and friendship. There's a lot in the Gospel of John about this, and I'm going to talk about it in just a minute. But number 4, for the future, testifying to what Jesus is hearing, feeling, and sensing from God. Reminding all of us how good it can be to make out our own testimony, what we hear and feel and sense from that great spirit that we call God. What are you hearing and feeling from God? What is God doing in your spirit and in your soul, in your space, in your life? So today, I want to continue my focus on number 3, conversing with people about spiritual things. We talk about everything else when we're together, when we're online, when we're on the phone. We talk about the weather and sports, our families, politics, health, careers, even religion. But Jesus talked with people about God and how the Spirit of God is present all the time in every event of life. One of the more famous conversations, Jesus and Nicodemus. Jesus told Nicodemus, you remember, that the Spirit of God is like the wind. We can feel it. We can sense that it's moving. We can tell when it is strongly present because the trees begin to wave and it pushes the car when we're driving. The wind can send a chill through the body, or the wind carries the aroma of somebody next door barbecuing in the backyard. Yes, we notice these things that the wind brings to our attention, but we don't know where the wind comes from and why and where it's going or how to control it. Certainly none of that. It's all a mystery. And that's what Jesus was talking about. Over and over again, he had these conversations. Now, I want to give you a list of most of the conversations that John records Jesus having. Of course, he had many, many others. According to John, his ministry was 3 years. Over 3 years, he would have had hundreds, if not thousands, of conversations. But in the gospel, chapter 1, Jesus had a conversation with Nathanael. Chapter 3, he had a conversation with Nicodemus. Chapter 4, Jesus talked with the woman at the well. You're familiar with that story. It's very famous. Chapter 5, Jesus talked with an invalid sitting by a pool hoping for healing. That's chapter 5. In chapter 6, he had a conversation with a whole crowd, and then later also with his disciples. Chapter 8, he had a conversation with the Pharisees. We don't know how many. And then chapter 9 with his disciples. Chapter 9 also records a conversation Jesus had with a blind man. Chapter 11, after the death of Lazarus, Jesus had a conversation with his two sisters, Jesus' friends, Mary and Martha. Chapter 13, he had a conversation with Simon Peter, and that's the one I'm going to focus on today. Chapter 18, as part of his trial, Jesus had a conversation with Pilate. Chapter 20, after the resurrection, he had a conversation with Thomas, about putting your finger in the hands of Jesus. Then finally, the last chapter, John 21, Jesus had another conversation with Simon Peter. These are all presented as conversations. And Jesus also gave speeches, sermons, or homilies, especially as recorded by John. He healed a lot of people. He performed miracles. He attended festivals. He ate a lot. He did all of that. But these 13 episodes in the Gospel of John, we can classify as conversation. And I want to say right now that I think strongly, and I'm surely not unique in this, that what we have in the Bible are very short summaries, synopsis, abbreviations of these conversations. Think again about Nicodemus, who came to see Jesus at night. You can read through that summary in 2 minutes. I timed it. I read through it out loud, put my clock right there, less than 2 minutes. That's what we have as dialogue before John in chapter 3 transitioned into his commentary, his explanation, his exhortation. You think Nicodemus walked across Jerusalem at night for a 2-minute conversation? No, I don't think so. Let's take a look at another conversation. Chapter 13. It records the scene of Jesus washing the feet of the disciples and the conversation with Peter that was part of that 17 verses. in your English Bible. It will take you 2 minutes to read it if you read slowly and paying attention to diction. But I suspect that rather than 2 minutes, this was 2 hours. All the key disciples were there, probably others. Certainly there were women because there was a meal. It was a festival, John says. And after eating and talking and praying and all the small talk, Jesus did this. He got up, picked up a basin and a water and towel. He knelt down and washed the feet of the people who were there. It does not say that only the feet of men were washed. Think about that. Is it possible that Jesus washed the feet of the women? He had no doubt a conversation with everybody whose feet he washed. I know ministers who say something personal and specific to every person to whom they serve communion. They call each person by name. I wonder if Jesus did that, said something to each person about their feet or the dirt or the journey that made their feet dirty. Maybe he said something about the day ahead when more serious things would happen. Maybe he talked to them about why he was washing feet. Sometimes we do that now, wash feet. Have you ever been to a service of believers when foot washing started? Some churches around do it periodically, maybe once a year as a symbolic practice. But some churches, especially, I want to say up in the mountains, do it religiously. It's like a communion. They do it regularly, sometimes every week, sometimes when they have a meal. Jesus washed the feet. It was a common practice in his day because travel was dirty. Now we might translate this into shoe shining instead of foot washing, or even car washing instead of foot washing. Imagine Jesus working at the car wash out behind the church, helping the youth group raise money. People would say, Jesus, no, you stay in the building and do your teaching. People want to hear you speak. But Jesus went out and joined the kids, trying to raise a little money with a car wash or something. In wealthy families, they might hire somebody to do. So the story that's recorded in the 13th chapter of John is this. Jesus comes to Peter. And Peter asks a question. Are you going to wash my feet? Jesus says, of course. Simon Peter said, no way. Not me. You're not washing my feet. Why would Simon Peter say that? Why would he resist a foot washing? I don't know. Maybe he felt the way I have felt at times when a host says to me during a pastoral visit, can I get you something to eat? And I say, no, don't do that. That's not necessary. By which I mean, don't go to any trouble. Let's just sit and talk. Maybe Simon Peter was embarrassed by his feet. Some people are, you know. He did not want attention brought to his feet. Maybe they were too big or too mangled or too dirty or whatever. But maybe Simon Peter already sensed what Jesus was doing and why. And Simon Peter knew his own soul, how broken and half-hearted, even deceitful or self-centered it was. Peter knew enough about himself that he was not surprised when, a little later, Simon Peter denied even knowing Jesus and refused to defend Jesus, his friend and redeemer. Simon Peter knew. And he knew when Jesus got that close, it disturbed him. Not my feet, Simon Peter says. Jesus says, no foot washing, no place in the kingdom. Wow, pretty direct. The giving and receiving of clean feet is to understand what the kingdom living is all about. It's to understand what the spiritual life is all about, to understand what true humanity is all about. Washing the feet of another person, that is, caring for their needs, bending your own knee to help another, putting the needs of another person before your own. When Jesus said, no foot washing, no kingdom living, Simon Peter said this, well, then wash all of me, Jesus, from the head to the toe, from tip to tip, inside and out. Wash me all over. Who knows what else was said in that foot washing? What jokes were thrown around, what revelations were seen and heard and felt. Surely Simon Peter was not the only one who had something to say. Finally, Jesus said, Simon Peter, do you understand what I've done for you? That's the ideal question of every teacher, every leader, every parent. You know and understand what I've done and said and why, what it means? Isn't that the core of these conversations, all of them? Do we understand what I'm doing and why and what will come of it? Do you understand what God is doing and why and what will come of it? Did Simon Peter know what Jesus was trying to say? Do you know what Jesus is trying to say to you? Do you know what God is doing to get your attention and show you something important about life and love and success and failure? Have you ever stopped in the middle of some event and asked, what are you trying to teach me, God, or show me or direct me? Isn't that what it means to be a spiritual person? Not only to be eager to humble yourself and to serve others and wash their feet, but to ask this question, what are you showing me, Lord? What do you want me to know? What do you want me to see and do and feel? Isn't that what a conversation with Jesus is all about? When I was a teenager, I sang in a gospel quartet. I know that's hard for some of you to believe. We sang that old gospel song, Just a Little Talk with Jesus. I had the bass part, which is special in that song. Simon Peter had a little talk with Jesus about life and politics and Jesus and Simon Peter. It did not prevent Simon Peter from making mistakes, telling a lie, turning his back on Jesus. Fell hard. But he got up and kept going in the power and the Spirit of God, with the words of Jesus ringing in his ears. I hope you have a conversation with Jesus this week. Tell me about it. Write me, call me, text me, message me. Thank you for listening today. Thank you for tuning in to Sunday in the House. I'm your host and your friend, hopefully the one washing your feet and talking with you about kingdom living. Let me hear from you. Visit my website at themeetinghouse.net. You can read lots of things there, book reviews, and you can watch many of the videos I've done, especially on the Tangle Tour of 23. You can make a donation. We need your help. This is a good week. I'm planning the Tangle Tour of 26. I'm going to be in Kentucky this week, checking dates and looking at venues and making plans. Pray for my safe travels and for my success. Pray for those around you, for those in charge of the schools and churches and businesses, cities and nations. Wash somebody's feet this week as a servant of Christ. And I'll see you next Sunday right here in the house. God bless you all.